Today on The Independent, football is almost back. P and I preview Notre Dame's fall camp, which kicks off on Wednesday, July 31st.
Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson in South Penn, joined as always by my co-host Matt Fortuna in Chicago. And Matt, as you stated quite clearly, season is upon us. That's the end of summer vacation. For me, it was made a couple alumni club visits out to Denver and Seattle. Thanks for Mike McGlinchey for coming out to the Denver event. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, we're counting down the hours to Notre Dame getting back at it. And it, I had a one-on-one with Mike Denbrock on Monday morning. And as we were walking out, I was just like, man, this is going to be a long season. And he said like, oh yeah, long as blank, blank, blank. But I was like, this feels like a team that's like geared up to do it. And I was like, you didn't feel that way in 2012 or 2015. And he's like, not really. Like this just feels, I mean, alignment is sort of a buzzword to the point of cliche in college football, but Notre Dame football right now feels like everything is pulling in one direction, and that it's to the level of like, if Notre Dame is not hosting a college football playoff game, it would be a disappointing season, never mind just making it. But there's a ton to get into with Notre Dame, because it feels like this is a year that could be a pretty unique season.
Yeah, I'm completely with you, Pete. I think I like to judge people on their actions more than their words. And I think everything we've seen from Notre Dame football this whole offseason has shown that Notre Dame football is back in business, for lack of a better term. I think, there's a lot riding on this season. We don't need to go over the whole year three cliche with Notre Dame head coaches, but this is a team built to make a playoff run. I genuinely believe that. I think the schedule sets up as such where, the focus is all going to be on Texas A&M, and I think that keeps everyone adds a sense of urgency to camp and keeps everyone locked in a way that they may not be with a lesser opponent. And I think you get through that first game, which I think they should. Boy, does the well of possibilities open up for this team. I mean, they're going to be favored in every single game. I think this season they're not favored in the A&M game for whatever reason, but I just think with this team coming back, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, playoff or bust, I think, is the bare minimum. I think that's the bare minimum really for every blue blood in college football these days. I think this is a team that should be hosting a playoff game, should obviously win that game if it's at home, and make a run. And you brought up the word alignment. I was talking to someone in the Goog, this week who brought that up, and kind of the same way you did, said, I know it's a cliche, but like, man, we just feel so much support right now in a way that we haven't, internally, externally before. And it's all hands on deck right now. There's no hesitancy about what this program can and should be. And that's refreshing to hear, I think, from the outside looking in, especially when you look at the talent on this roster and you look at all the work Marcus Freeman and company have put in to build this program for this run.
Yeah, I feel like Notre Dame football, especially with like Bavacqua at the top of it, it's like feels maybe a little bit, I don't know if I would say like comfortable in its own skin or like not apologetic for what it's going for, but I mean, from Shields Hall to like where the NIL is to the contract extensions, success in the transfer portal. I realize there's some like undercurrents in like high school recruiting that are a bit dodgy at the moment, but I think bearing into the season, it feels like it's set up to win. I made this point to somebody on campus last week. It's like, a lot of Swarbrick's legacy is tied to this season too, because if this season goes well, Marcus Freeman is extended, there's like a little bit more of a long-term stability. That's sort of a coda to the Swarbrick era. But I feel like Notre Dame is not, I say this here on, at the end of July going into August, but like, I feel like Notre Dame is comfortably out of its own way at the moment. Like it's just, everything is kind of rolling in a positive direction. And like, I think Freeman gets those vibes. The roster gets those vibes. I had some one-on-one with some players last week. And I mean, I think Jack Kaiser said like, he's talking about gearing up for the season physically and training with Lauren Lando. And he's just like, hopefully this is a 16-game season. And it didn't sound like, man, our goal is to win a national championship. Like, it wasn't wishful at all. It was just like, this is what we're going out to do. And I feel like Notre Dame's roster is maybe not set up to win 16 games, but it's going to be in the conversation to, play 16 or play 15, or at least, get out of the first round of the playoff.
Yeah, I think, it's easy to forget, the Notre Dame Pete Bavak was walking into is not the Notre Dame that Jack Swarbrick walked into in 2008. And obviously Jack did a lot of heavy lifting to get this program to this point. But I'm with you in the sense of like, I felt like, and maybe this was a Brian Kelly thing, but there was always like an excuse. Yeah, we can't do like, I feel like everything me and you have regurgitated on this podcast over the last like 5 or 6 years was always met with like well, we can't do that. We can't fly assistants private. We can only recruit X number of like I've not heard any like I can't from anyone there within the last year or so. Someone in the Google tried to me is like, if we were to make a playoff run and, an SEC team was to show off their speed and look a lot quicker and better than us, beat us, we know we're going to have the support, whether it's NIL or from the administration, the recruiting department, you name it, to say, go out there and get better players. Because that's what you do when you're a college football blue blood and your goal is to win a national championship. And again, not that they didn't care about this before, but I just think there is, burning the boat, to the Lou Holtz. What's the Lou Holtz saying? We burn the boats. Like there's no going back. Like,
there were so many Lou Holtz sayings. Yeah. I thought it was going to be hard of a lion.
Quite a few, actually. This is an old one. But yeah, I mean, I just think there's a sense of like, we're all in, we're swimming in the deep end of the college football waters right now, and we're going to take our best shot this year.
Yeah, I think that's all true. And like the sort of like roster enhancements, like Riley Leonard, Bo Collins, Rod Hurd, Mitch Jeter, RJ Oben, Jordan Clark. It's just it is a long list of guys that Notre Dame is literally invested in to get here. When you see pictures of their trip to New York, part of the deal of getting a Jordan Clark or a Bo Collins is like, we're going to take you on this trip. We're going to show you off as like Notre Dame football players to more of a national audience. Like that's like Notre Dame flexing something that like, look, I don't see Texas football players or LSU football players on a set of ESPN shows. Like
I think Jordan Clark may have gone there on his own.
That definitely, he has a connect there that probably could have got him in. But I just think like that's a way for Notre Dame to sort of flex who they are. That is a little bit different. But I also think
they did not have a Pitbull concert on July 1st, like Texas.
Yes. That seems like if you said, did this happen at Four Winds Field, home of the South Bend Cubs, or the University of Texas? I'd be like, I'm not sure which one, who had the Pitbull concert. I just think that like Notre Dame is able to flex some of the like things that make it different, but also like from a financial point of view, like you don't need to be different than Ohio State or Oregon or Alabama. You just need to be like a little bit more like them. And like, I think that they're a lot more like them than maybe they were even a couple of years ago.
It was interesting just because you brought up Ohio State. Ross Bjork, their new athletic director, told Yahoo last week at Big Ten Media Days, he put a price tag on that roster. He said, we got about $20 million in NIL money going to players right now. And that's the highest I think anyone's spoken out publicly. Obviously, there's a lot of suspicions and wink, wink, around the country. And I think Dan Lanning was asked afterward, and he's like, I'm not going to reveal that publicly if I don't have to. He's got Phil Knight's treasure chest there. But I just think it's, I don't know, it spoke to me as like almost like a line of demarcation. Like, okay, we're over that like stigma. Used to be the worst thing you could ever say about a program is they're paying players. Now the best thing you could say about a program is they're paying players this much.
Yeah. And it's again, like you're either in the haves or the have not. Notre Dame's a have. Oregon's a have. Ohio State's a have. Like that's the company you need to be keeping.
No, absolutely. And we're critical of some NIL stuff in previous years. And again, I feel like anything I could like pick apart about this place, I don't mean it like intentionally. Like I don't have like right now I'm like, okay, I can't wait to see this team play football because I think they're one of the best teams in the country. I think they're going to have a really good test in week 1. It's going to be a fun game, a fun atmosphere, a lot of like internal storylines and intriguing storylines with Mike Elko on the other side against Riley Leonard. And if you win that, boy, like I don't want to say smooth sailing because this team has had a habit in recent years of losing a game or two they shouldn't. But like you get over that hump, it's hard to see them losing 2 games this year. And 11-1 will absolutely get you in. 10-2, we'll see.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the 11-1 with a win at A&M, I think would be part of that winning solution. I mean, that is a very tricky first game. And I think if you played A&M in midseason, Notre Dame probably would be favored.
I
But
agree.
week one with a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line. I mean, Denbrock even said when I sat down with him on Monday, it's just like, man, you wish that game was in week 7. But it's not. So we're going to have to figure this one out. It would have been a good year for that to be later, to have us like to get Ohio State at the end of September opposed to the beginning of September, 22 versus 23 with the schedule. I'd be interested. That's kind of one of the things I'm interested to talk to Marcus about on Wednesday after first practice, about like just how the structure of camp has to change based on the first opponent. Like, I think that by his own admission, like his first training camp was a little bit too much like every day is the Super Bowl. I thought they came out tactically and did pretty well at Ohio State. Ohio State was a much better team. However, by the time they got to Ohio State, they were without Jared Patterson, and Cam Hart was limited, in part because their camp was so brutal. They didn't get to the other side of it. Last year, smoother sailing through camp. Everyone's available, not just for the opener, but by the time Ohio State came around at the end of September, like, they're good to go. Like, and what happens? Like, Notre Dame was the better team for much of the game and then lost it at the end. So it just was a completely different dynamic there. But like, how do you balance those two? Because like, you got to be very urgent with the first game being A&M, but you can't be so urgent that then you screw yourself against, Louisville in week 4, something like that. So it's, I mean, there'll be a fascinating game. Speaking of which, we should mention that we're debating doing a live show in the Houston area the Friday night before A&M. If you're interested in attending, please let us know. I think we're trying to take a very.
How many of you are making the trip to the game? I imagine a lot of you are, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you are making the trip, would you attend our podcast? But yeah, let us know about that, because that will be. There's just so much on the line for Notre Dame. Like, I think A&M sort of has like a bit of a free roll there, but it's a great debut for Elko, and if they play well and lose, awesome. Notre Dame has to play like they could play poorly and win. That would be a fine trade for Notre Dame to make. So it's as interesting an opener as I can remember. I think it's more interesting than Ohio State, because like, I didn't think that Notre Dame had a shot to win it. You got to go back to like the Michigan game in 18 here, where it's like both teams had a lot on the line, but Notre Dame really had to prove something coming off 17 that wasn't a fluke. This is similar to me. It's like, you want to prove something after 23 that you're building. Did they take a step forward last year? Probably. But like, at the end of this season, we can't be saying, did they take a step forward? Probably. Right. And that to get the win at A&M would kind of answer that question before it even could really be asked.
Yeah, I feel like when you're in a conference too, these Notre Dame games, especially early in the year, are house money. Obviously, with a new coach, you're playing with house money, but with automatic bids, right? Like, look at USC's schedule; they could get killed by LSU and Notre Dame, and I don't think they'll win the Big Ten, but in theory, could still win the Big Ten and make the playoff. So I think the pressure's on Notre Dame in this game, with the expectations around them and with the low expectations around A&M, or at least A&M's habit of failing to meet expectations year after year. You mentioned camp. I find it interesting for the fact that we almost overlooked this now, but like, they didn't have a strength coach last camp. In fact, I believe they arrived on day 1 because they started earlier because of the Ireland game. They arrived on day 1, and Matt Bailiff's office was empty, and that threw people for a loop, at least initially, as far as what happened. I don't know the ins and outs of strength training to tell you how that affected them, good or bad. I don't think it affected them, from a negative standpoint, at least early on. I'd imagine at some point, not having that voice in your ear that you've been accustomed to your whole career, like, is a difference and is an absence. But they have Lauren Landau now, and he's been there since January. All the reviews have been rave so far. And yeah, I mean, how do you not just balance not putting all of your eggs in one basket, but you mentioned like play 16 games. That's a lot different
Yeah.
than the 12 or 13 these guys are used to playing in a successful year. How do you manage that? I think depth is more important than ever before. I think when you look around the nation throughout the offseason and the transfer portal, obviously a lot of movement all over the country, probably less so in Notre Dame as far as departures. I think that's really important. Like, people are going to get hurt over the course of the season or maybe become disinterested over the course of the season. I think Notre Dame has a very deep roster, obviously a very old roster, particularly on defense. I mean, you can count them. The number of 5th and 6th year seniors across the board is almost unheard of. But they've got talent behind them. Maybe not proven talent, but again, I think that's going to matter. The depth is going to show itself in different ways, I think, throughout the country this season. And I was looking at, Vegas over-unders earlier, and I look at those. That's a lot of those SEC teams are the big SEC now, and I'm thinking even Texas at 10.5. I think they're all going under for the most part, and I still think a team like Texas is good enough to win the national championship. I mean, you could easily see a 2 or 3 loss national champion this year because of the 12-team playoff, and I think you're going to get into some pickles here. I mean, Lincoln Riley, a very timely example for Notre Dame fans, got asked the Big Ten Media Day last week about that. And he said, what if we clinch a spot in the Big Ten title game, but we got to play Notre Dame the week after? And he took it to a place I didn't expect him to take, at least publicly, because I think Brett McMurphy said, like, would you sit guys that game? And he's like, it's something I got to think of. Like, if puts us in a better position to compete and win a national championship. Yep. And I mean, I guess 2 years earlier, they could have done the same thing, although they were still playing for a playoff spot. But it's going to be, I just think this thing's going to, the devil's always in the details, right? Like, as much as I'm excited that the Big Ten title game will matter because it's going to have 2 really good teams as opposed to Iowa versus Michigan, I also wonder, like, if you're the second place team in the Big Ten, you're going to get in the playoff whether you win or lose that game. Or you're going to be hurt in that game seed-wise by losing and then having the third place team that had off that week jump you. I don't know. Again, Notre Dame's used to watching that weekend, and they're going to have a different calculus. I'm just very fascinated by how coaches across the country manage their rosters throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, when you say Notre Dame's deep, like, I would say they're deep at receiver, defensive line, quarterback, running back, tight end, like offensive line, linebacker, DB, offensive line. I'm not sure I'd say that they're deep there. Maybe they will be by the end of November.
I think DB,
like linebacker in particular could be a spot that like develops depth over the course of the season.
I would throw DB in there too. I mean, I think they've got at least
top
end. They're a lot better than they've been.
Yeah, I think they're top heavy at DB, and like the top is really good. I think after that it falls off. But
it's officially summer, which means it's time to get into Roback with 20% off for our listeners at The Independent. It's our go-to apparel on the course, at the lake, around the diamond, or even recording a pod. With polos, hoodies, shorts, and quarter zips, Roback has what you need to get active and stay active all summer long. And with football around the corner, gear up for those tailgates and watching the Irish in person this fall. You've probably seen Shamrock polos around campus already. Get yours. Listeners of The Independent can get 20% off your first purchase by using the promo code IRISH. Again, that's 20% off all hoodies, polos, quarter zips, and more at Roback on your first order with the promo code IRISH.
So when I was in Denver, I sat down with Lauren Landau a couple weeks ago. And then when I was in Denver, I stopped by his facility there, spent some time with a couple of the NFL players that he trains, talked to a couple of his coaches. And it was much more like, I hesitate to say like he's not a strength coach, he's a movement coach. But in a lot of ways, it's like flexibility, availability, stability. Like, in the pros, you're training essentially like finished articles, right? Like in college, it's how do we, build you up? And that was something I talked to Jack Kaiser about last week, was just, and he said, like, look, when I got here, everything is like mental toughness and push yourself as hard as you can. And like, you got to go to like some dark places to do that. And like, but he's like, I don't need that now. Like, that's not what I need in a weight program. I need to make sure that I'm twitchy. I need to make sure that my joints are strong. I need to make sure that I'm flexible. And he said, like, it's common for guys to go in and do an extra hour with Landau every day in the summer, just like on mobility and flexibility. And one of the players I talked to is Josh Simmons. I think I got that name right, but Pro Bowl safety was with the Broncos, got released recently. But he said like the difference in training with Landau is even like if you break down to try to make a tackle and you get rolled up on, you're flexible enough that maybe you sprain your MCL and you're out 2 weeks. If you're stiff, you tore your ACL and you're out for the season. So it's like even like that is, keeping availability maximized, keeping twitchiness at a high end. No new strength coach has ever had a bad first off season. Like it's never happened in the history of football. So it hasn't happened this off season at Notre Dame either. However, when you talk to the players about what they're doing with Landau, when you talk to some of the players he worked with in the NFL, you can get why this may have been like a legitimately good offseason and the players would respond to that. How he builds a Kingston Viliamu-Asa or a Gerby Lambert or CJ Carr from like the bottom up, we'll see. But I think in terms of this roster, where you're starting 3 master's degree recipients on defense, in addition to 5 other graduate students, those aren't players who need like the just like soul crushing lift, run to you puke type workouts. Those are guys that need to be treated like pros. And I think Landau, from all sort of the reporting that I've done, has done a really nice job of that.
I believe Justin Simmons is who you talk to. If my NFL knowledge is,
did I say Jeff? Who's Jeff Simmons? I don't know.
Who was Jeff?
Yeah,
Jeff
was
Simmons was the Georgia Tech or Nebraska quarterback. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
But just hearing you say that, and again, as you can probably tell if you're watching this, I'm not exactly a strength coach or like in the weight room every day. However, I just think that NFL-like approach is more important now than ever with the potential lengths of these seasons, and with, in the case of Notre Dame, a very veteran-laden team, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. I do want to get to camp and like the early expectations. And again, I think we know what we're going to see on defense. My question is essentially, are we going to see defense dominate?
Yes.
And are we going to see, what are we going to see out of Riley Leonard? Because I think we know what he can be. We didn't get a whole lot of that in the spring. We didn't get a chance to see a whole lot of that spring.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I've gathered from talking to people is they're very, very high on him with everything. But it's like me and you, it would have been nice to see him go through a full spring with Denbrock or go through a spring game and actually go through all of it, because it's all so new. And again, if you're going ones versus ones with this roster, we know which side is going to win, and how do we judge it?
Yeah, I asked Denbrock a little bit about that. It's like, how do you engineer camp so the offense can actually get something done? Because if the defense wanted to shut them out every day, they like almost could do that. That's an exaggeration, but the defense is just, they're so far ahead, and like the offense knows it. I think that the Notre Dame would be best served in camp by sort of downshifting the defense and letting the offense like get its feet underneath it a little bit. But Denbrock said like this is not going to be a juggernaut in year one. Year ones are never like that. This is going to be a work in progress. The Leonard development, how he processes stuff with live bullets, how he sees it, like that is all a legit concern. That's a question that has not been answered yet. I think Notre Dame feels good about it, but they got to see it. Defensively, I don't want to say like it's a perfect defense, because there's not like this like stud pass rusher off the edge, but man, it's like I don't know what the weak spot is.
Right.
Is it like will linebacker? Because Jalen Seed is maybe not that experienced, but he's a third-year junior, and Jack Kaiser can tell him where to line up. Jordan Clark as a nickel, 1,000+ snaps. Rod Hurd 2,000+ snaps. I have a very hard time looking at this defense and then just sort of backtracking at CFP stats last year, like scoring defense. Notre Dame finished 7th at 15.9 points per game. Like they're going to be better than that, right? Like
I think so.
Under 14 points a game?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think it's possible that schedule, but I think it's possible with everyone they have coming back with a third year in Al Golden system, who people will not stop raving about to me, and rightfully so. And 5-6 year seniors starting probably. I mean, you mentioned third year junior as if like he's a rookie. Like Benjamin Morrison's a third year. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's the elder statesman.
No, it could be 8. It could be 8. I mean, you could have Watts, Hurd, Kaiser, Clark, Botello, Cross, Mills, Oben. That's 8.
So yeah,
I mean, like, it's insane. It's an insane amount of experience on the defense.
It is, with an entire defensive staff back as well. I just think it's very actually, O'Leary's gone, but same system. I mean, I just think. I mean, I don't hesitate to say
the guys who are not grad students. There's like Benjamin Morrison.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's a pup on this defense, and he's an All-American. I mean, I think they could be the best defense in the country. Will they be? I don't know. But, I mean, I think they'll be better than last year. I think they should be better than last year. I think they're going to be really, really good. I think, linebacker depth would be the one cause for concern, and that's when I'm, like, micro-analyzing it and comparing them to the defensive line and the secondary. I am extremely high on this defense, and we saw it from them last season, and I just think that's going to work to the offense's benefit throughout the course of the season when, like Mike Denbrock told you, it's not going to be a finished product. I don't know if I've been this optimistic about Notre Dame defense. I mean, I'm trying to think. It's not like 2012 we thought going into the year they would be that good. 20 maybe, but even going into the year, I wasn't sure if they were going to be this good.
No,
even that team was coming off that Michigan blowout. Like, this team did not. They shut down Ohio State's offense.
Right.
Clemson and Louisville.
Good, but it's like there's always been like a weakness to pick at with the defense, because pretty much every college defense has a weakness. This one I just have a really hard time with. It was funny when I asked Denbrock about you got a really young offensive line. Can you hide that through play calling? Can you help that through play calling? And I said, like, I referenced the 2012 defense at the very end when Kavari Russell was starting at corner against USC, and like it took USC a quarter to figure out, like, just chuck it deep and see what happens, and like Kavari just started tackling people. And he's like, yeah, you can kind of do that with the offensive line, but it's like even that defense pre-Alabama still had some like weaknesses where you're like, okay, you could attack them there, or like maybe if you moved Carlo Calabrese and put him in pass defense situations, like that wasn't a great matchup. Like, I just think like this defense is, I don't know what the weak point is. I really don't, other than like they don't have a dominant edge pass rusher, but so what? You've got Riley Mills and Howard Cross, and then like, I mean, is there a better backup tackle combination than Gabe Rubio and Jason Onye? Like
2012 didn't have a dominant pass rushing. Kaplan Lewis Moore.
Tuitt, Nix, Kaplan Lewis Moore.
Tuitt. I forgot about Tuitt.
I mean, they had studs, and then Teo behind them. But I think you'd be at a hard time picking out the other elite players. I think that
they all got drafted.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very talented group. But
Matthias, though, was a redshirt freshman playing defense for the first time.
Yeah, like Zeke Mata, like Jamar Slaughter got hurt earlier in the year.
Right.
Missed the rest of the season. Zeke Mata was like a late round pick. I'm trying to Kavari was one of the corners on that team.
Bennett Jackson.
Another
guy, converted receiver from a year before.
Yeah, late round pick. I'm trying to run through the linebackers like Danny Spahn. Danny Spahn, I don't think he's a good college player, but I don't know where he would even fit into this defense. Carlo Calabrese, same thing. I don't think he fits into this defense. It was just I think Prince Shembo was the other outside linebacker. This group to me is better. Like I don't think there's as good as Benjamin Morrison is, like Manti Te'o is Manti Te'o. Like that's as good as it gets. But I think that if you just ordered 1 through 22, if you just rank the 11 starters on the 12 defense and the 11 starters on the 24 defense. Like, man, I think that, Teo and Tuitt probably would be 1 and 2. But after that, Knicks would be up there, but it would be a lot of 24 until you
they're just so much deeper now. Like,
yeah,
that was not a deep defense. I mean, I don't want to say they got lucky, but Chuck Barton and others have said it. Like, that was as close to a 3-9 team as it was to a 13-0 team. And that defense was really good. They were really sharp. They were really veteran. They had great leadership. And for the most part, they stayed healthy. They did not have the depth that these guys are going to have this year. And for everything I just said about how advanced the defense is in relation to the offense this year, the offense is not going to be an anchor the way it was last year. And you're just trying to figure out who's going to
2012.
That's what, no, I'm saying 2012. Like, it's not going to be the way it was then. Like, that's those problems do not exist anymore. So, again, very, very optimistic on the defense. I did want to go back to the USC discussion real quick because I mentioned Lincoln Riley earlier. He was talking about scheduling last week at Big Ten Media Days. Talked about how hard their schedule is this year. They play Notre Dame, yada yada. So I took Lincoln, like, I gave him he gave me the opening. I said, "What do you think of the future of this series?" And he gave a long answer about how he loves it and he's a traditionalist and blah blah blah. But rivalries have died through conference realignment, and if it were to inhibit USC's path to a playoff, that's something he would hope to look at. And again, no one knows how the committee is going to judge 12 teams, right? I think with 4 teams, it was like, all right, we're going to go to the loss column. You got 0, you're in. You got 1, maybe you're in. Yeah. Now, with schedules being what they are, they say you want to incentivize hard scheduling and to make the regular season matter more. Are they really going to do that? I don't know. I had a pre-scheduled interview with Marcus Freeman last week, a day after that, and I asked him about it, and he gave he said, "I love it. I hope to keep it. I understand where they're coming from," and I'm paraphrasing here, but I hope to keep it. It's funny because obviously, especially in light of all the reports about USC trying to get out of the LSU game, the immediate reactions are Lincoln Riley's scared. He doesn't want it. That's why he ran from Oklahoma. He doesn't want Notre Dame now. And USC fans are like, hey, we could end you right now. Like, you like your independence? We'll see about that if you can't schedule us every year. Your scheduling options are going to go out the window, and you're going to be crawling to the Big Ten. I don't think it's that extreme, but it is, an interesting spot for USC. I was told after, and I updated my story, the current game contract, and they're both private schools, so it's not public record, but I was told by someone who's seen it, the current contract expires after next season, the 2025 game at Notre Dame, which makes this a more urgent topic, I think, than what it was last week. And I've been told both schools are talking. They hope to continue the game at least in the near future. But I think in USC's case, they certainly want to see how this 12-team and probably 14-team playoff by 2026 plays out and what the committee truly values. But I mean, it's Notre Dame and USC. It's the longest intersectional rivalry there is. Yeah. It's the most, they're all unique, but it's very unique because of where each is located. That's something that, again, it wouldn't be the first rivalry to go by the wayside, but man, it's really hard to not see Notre Dame have their season there every other year.
Don't you think if it was still a 4-team playoff that like this would be in grave danger of ending? Whereas like the 12/14 team playoff feels like that actually you could easily talk yourself into like the advantages for USC. Not this year because you can't have Notre Dame and LSU. That's insane. But in normal circumstances, if you're playing 9 conference games in the Big Ten, you're still getting your Marylands of the world in there. That Notre Dame is your 10th game, and then you have 2 against San Jose State and UC Davis, something like that. Like the 12-team playoff seems to make me think that this will continue. Whereas if we were still in a 14 playoff world, I would be legitimately concerned that it was about to end.
USC fans will tell you they've never played. They're the only team to never play an FCS team. So UC Davis would not be on their schedule. However,
there's a first time for everything.
There is. I don't think this is a 4-12 team argument or discussion. I think it's USC's in the Big Ten. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I see it. Like we're going to the Midwest for multiple games now every year. Some are going to be really difficult. Why would we do like they're going to Michigan this year for their first ever Big Ten game? Why would we keep Notre Dame? I think that's the lens through which they see it. I could be wrong. Certainly, if they were in the Big Ten and there's still a 14 playoff this year, I think we'd still be having this same discussion. But that's kind of how I see it. The same way, like I've never gotten any clarity on what the status of the Stanford series is with the ACC agreement now, and I don't know if anyone's actually got it. That.
I've talked to an ACC AD about that, and like was told like Notre Dame floated. And I'm sure we said this on the podcast before, but like Notre Dame floated like we would like to play Stanford, but as you know, could they be every year? But like that's one of our ACC games, and the ACC politely told them absolutely not.
Okay, so it's going to stay as is, basically.
Yeah, and then when it comes around, like when they play Stanford, as if they were in the rotation, fine, that can count as one of the games. But you know, with how many teams are in the ACC? 37. Like that's only coming around every so often.
Got it. Well, that's like who's two Big 12? It was a Utah and someone. There's a non-conference Big 12 game this year.
Yeah, it's like Wake Forest, North Carolina from a few years ago. You know, something similar to that. But I mean, that's like for my fan survey, that was like, what would you change about the schedule other than dropping Navy? Like dropping Stanford was like, that was a high volume answer. I don't
argue. I mean,
I don't like now that Sorberg's not the AD, I just don't think that the connection with Stanford is nearly what it was just 12 months ago around this place.
No, I just think I love that game when both teams were thriving, and I think in many ways Stanford showed Notre Dame what they could be in the early Brian Kelly years. And once Notre Dame quickly realized that, put the work in and surpassed them, it was like, okay, thanks.
I mean, now that Stanford no longer employs like one of the greatest coaches of like modern generation and Jim Harbaugh, like it's just not that interesting of a game anymore. You know, it's like you go out, I think even at Notre Dame now, it's just like, whatever. Like that's not
having that as your marquee home night game was always kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that doesn't play.
Even though Stanford actually won that last game, but still.
Yeah. 10 years ago, that was cool. Now, I mean, look, I love the West Coast trip at the end. I think that's important to Notre Dame, but I don't think that carries a whole lot of cachet to go out and play at Stanford, like the academic peer part of it all. Just that's not resonating anymore.
I'll be curious in the short and long term what Notre Dame does with its schedules, whether it's talking about the Stanford series. I mean, you look at this year's schedule again, from a home schedule, very underwhelming. 2 trips to the tri-state New York area, back-to-back months against military academies. I don't understand that at all. Once, okay, you got a big alumni base there. I don't know why.
I think it's just make the best of the Miami situation is,
I guess, but
the only explanation that I could give you there.
It would be cool, and I know the Army game's a Notre Dame home game, but like, I don't know, to play at one of those venues at some point, I think would be cool because it would be a different spin on an old rivalry that a lot of Notre Dame fans and myself have not been able to experience. But when I look at the schedule, and again, outside of the very beginning and very end of it, it is kind of underwhelming. You look at those 2 trips out there, and again, I think one's fine and exciting. And again, I say this as, born and bred New Yorker, going there twice. I don't know. I don't know what it does for you.
Yeah, I mean, very little. I booked my travel for the season. I was able to find a flight into Newark on Friday before the Navy game and a flight out at 7:40 p.m. on Saturday after the game.
Noon game, right?
It's a noon game, so I'll be able to get back to South Bend immediately after that. That game could be played in Indianapolis or Kansas City or Calgary. It would not make a difference. I think the Army game will be cool. I think the Navy game is just again, I understand the history of that rivalry in that series, and it's important. And like, what is college football without tradition? But I think that's another series that, could you take another look at that and rotate military academies? I don't think that would be a bad decision at this point. I'm not even sure like Navy would be opposed to it, but just sort of.
I'm fine with the game. You need more exciting venues when you're playing a Navy home game. And I just think, again, both of them basically in the same spot within a month of each other does very little for me. And similar to the USC conversation, right? Like Army, once part of why this game, they waited so long to announce it was Army was moving from an independent to the AAC, where they're, in Army's case, going to play much better top to bottom schedule. And they're like, why would we add Notre Dame to this? Like it's going to be hard enough to win. In their case, I think they got to win 6 out of 11 games to make a bowl, because the Navy games after all the bowl selections, like it's just, I don't know. I'm fine keeping Navy. I think, and I don't know what it would take for Notre Dame to drop Navy. And I think I feel like that's a dangerous conversation if you're Notre Dame right now, just because, like, I don't want to say you need everything you can get. People are going to want to schedule Notre Dame, but like this situation where maybe USC does say, see you later. Okay, now what do you have to like fall back on or rely on that's consistent? Like they're going to be scheduling more Big Ten games. We've seen that with the Michigan State announcement. They've got some marquee SEC games coming up. But, in the same way, like some things seem different with other teams in different conferences. Like, what is Notre Dame? Like, they stopped playing Michigan annually. They don't play Purdue as much. Again, hypothetically, Stanford and USC go out the window. And again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I like some form of consistency, especially when you're an independent and you're kind of known for your ways that way.
So we sort of like veered off the training camp around the corner portion of the podcast, but like who are you most interested in? Like Riley Leonard excluded. Who are you most curious to see on Wednesday or hear about?
The non-big name DBs, Rod Hurd and Christian Gray are two names I've heard have really stood out in off-season workouts, and to see what kind of work they can get. I mean, in Hurd's case, he'll probably be starting, but to see what
Rod Hurd is a jacked up individual. I spent some time with him earlier in the summer in a group setting, but I was like, damn, like, okay, you've been in a weight room for 6 years.
You mean like physically?
Yeah, just like he is physically really well put together. Those guys would be on my list too.
I also know he's very old because he went to Harrison High School in Farmington Hills, where my cousin went, and that school closed down 5 years ago, I think. He might be the last Farmington Hills guy to ever play in college football. I want to see the offensive line too. Like, I think we have like sketched out in our mind what it will look like, but we've never, outside of Jagasaw, like there really hasn't been like, these are our 5 or this is our center, our guard, et cetera. And let's face it, that's the biggest question mark from a talent standpoint on this roster right now. And frankly, the biggest thing holding, I think, people back from getting fully behind Notre Dame as a maybe national championship contender this year, or at least why they're not favored in the Texas A&M game to open. So that's going to be the biggest position group, because again, I think it's a little open-ended, a lot of new faces there. Probably the most important position group. It's the one that Notre Dame's been doing better than most schools around the country for many years now. Yeah. By the way, they're going up in camp against an absolutely dominant defense. So it's going to be interesting trying to judge them.
Yeah, those guys like Gray and Hurd are interesting to me, especially with Morrison sideline. It really kind of is going to open up a competition between Mickey and Gray. We'll be able to see at least a little bit of that. Boubacar Traore, could he be a unique pass rusher off the edge? I don't know. You'd be sacrificing quite a bit of experience to put him in there. Jeremiah Love, when I sat down with Denbrock, I just sort of, the typical fishing expedition question of like, who's the most improved player from when you got here? We talked a lot about Jaden Greathouse as like one of those guys who could be the next good-ish, maybe better than that receiver at Notre Dame. He mentioned Jeremiah Love. He says he really likes Charles Jagasaw and Emil Wagner, which was not a name I was expecting to hear, because like I think he's sort of in the running with the second team in most of our minds. I mentioned Cooper Flanagan, Eli Raridon a little bit. But yeah, I think, what they do at running back with Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Riley Leonard is part of that run game solution as well. Ashton Craig was another player that Denbrock mentioned as like you want your center to be very good, but also like even better as a leader. And Craig was giving that to Notre Dame over the summer. So all that's interesting. And then James Rundell, who like, I don't know if he has a nickname yet, but he seems like somebody could punt the ball over those there mountains. And I want to see that happen with my own 2 eyes.
The Aussie Assassin. I'm going to trademark that right now.
Okay.
Get him.
All right.
Actually, he can't do active NIL, right? As a foreigner.
Oh, didn't they change that? I mean, after the Zach Edey, they
That's right.
figured out a way to get international people hooked up on NIL. I'm confident Notre Dame will find a workaround for that. So
they're a national university. They better. Love's interesting to me. If for no other reason than it feels like Notre Dame's been on a tear of second-year backs breaking out. And not just breaking out, but like really, like if you're a Notre Dame fan and you got to watch Audric Esme the last 2 years and Kyron Williams a couple of years before that, like there's something about those guys' running styles. I just think in an age where
Josh Adams was fun to watch.
Adams was fun too. He was a little different, like as far as like he was much more of a finesse runner, and he was running behind a Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. But these two guys, I don't know. There's something that like warms my football-loving heart, like where running backs kind of don't matter, or we're told they don't matter, and the juice those guys brought to their teams the last couple of years have been really, really exciting. And to hear Denbrock tell you that Love is a guy who has improved in his short time here, I think it's definitely encouraging. Not that I worry about that position group at all, but I'm curious if he can kind of take the reins, so to speak, and become that true number one back that they rely on. We talked about offensive line. Pat Coogan threw a better first pitch, Southside, better first pitch at White Sox than Marcus Freeman did at Yankee Stadium a week before. If anyone saw that, probably not, because it's the White Sox and they're down 8-0 in the first inning. And Coogan did not pitch the first inning, although he could have and should have, because he would not have done worse.
Good job, Cougs.
I got to ask, I don't think I asked Freeman this, but I feel like everyone overshoots it now on their Howard. I was at the Cubs game a couple weeks ago, and Howard Griffith threw out the first pitch, and everyone's so afraid to bounce it that they just completely air mail it every time.
Sail it. Yeah.
Freeman didn't air mail it. I think it was caught, but he definitely overthrew it. He spent some time with Aaron Judge while there too, which I found interesting. And Aaron Boone, who's a Trojan, but I'm sure they got along just fine.
Yeah, I think Freeman is not one to like shy away from like collecting new relationships and people along the way. I've always got an interest of like, if you're Aaron Judge, do you necessarily know Marcus Freeman? Like, is that?
Yeah, because Mike Denbrock recruited him as a tight end back in like 20. Did you write that? Someone wrote it.
I didn't know this.
I mean, it was like, actually, I remember talking to Denbrock about this years ago, and it was like, we knew he wasn't going to play.
Yeah. I mean, he made a good decision.
He did make a good decision, but like, yeah, like maybe he brought that up.
Interesting.
He has a recruiting page, like on Rivals or ESPN or one of them. Like, I believe he has a page, like a profile. So maybe you asked that. I don't know.
Good intel. Well, maybe this will be my second question to Marcus Freeman on Wednesday. Like, did Aaron Judge like know who you were? Like, is he a football fan? Apparently, yes. So.
Well, they had Jalen Miller over there the other night too. I don't know what the Yankees are doing with all that.
Oh, was he able to throw a strike?
I don't know if he threw a first pitch. I just saw him talking to Aaron Judge on like the Yankees
Instagram. He just tried to run it in. Yeah. All right. Maybe we'll wrap up there. Notre Dame's first practice, July 31st. We'll be back at the end of the week. We got the full practice on Wednesday. Marcus Freeman afterwards, and then I think we would get Denbrock and Golden, or Golden and Denbrock in some order at the end of the week as well. So it's all getting fired back up. Summer vacation has come to a screeching halt here. First day of school is Wednesday, and the Independent will be back at it. So until then, he's Matt, I'm Pete. Thanks for being with us on the latest episode of The Independent.